repo rate where it is on account of two things, and those two things constitute what he refers to as the structural constraints. So these are things, impediments that undermine the potential growth of the South African economy. And as a result of those challenges not being effectively addressed, the prospect of the reduction in the repo rate really does not look that positive. And what are those two structural constraints? The first one is the inefficiencies on the logistics side, so it undermines, if you like, the growth of the National Revenue Fund, the degree to which we are able to grow, if you like, the national pace, the growth of the South African economy. Or you can just say, I think they want you to fix this, but you can hear me? Yes. Yeah. Oh, you can hear me? Yes. Okay, let me put it here. So the growth of the South African economy is constrained as a result of these two challenges. Like I said, on the inefficiencies on the logistics side. So we are missing out on revenue earning potential as a result of exports because of the constraints. Now that we are in eThekwini, I'll use the Durban ports, the ability to which we are able to access international market. We are becoming less and less competitive, we are becoming less and less reliable, and therefore the potential of takers or buyers, they are looking at alternative markets to be able to procure, because you can't rely on South Africa and South African industry to provide that which you need on time, and that's why it's got also other implications. It means that our ability to earn revenue as a result of taxes that will be applied on those goods that we are exporting also contracts, and therefore we find significant challenges in us meeting our projections, the taxation projections. And that's why when the Minister of Finance tabled the medium-term budget policy statement, he makes the point that if you look at an in-year analysis in relation to our projections, where we think would be, from a taxation point of view, the amount of money that we have collected is significantly lower than when the minister tabled the budget. And as a result of that, it called for a very uncomfortable decision, the reprioritization of government spending, because we are running out of fiscal runway. And that means that amongst others, those considerations could include scaling down on infrastructure spend, if you like, discretionary funding. You need to reconsider that. And of course, over a period of time, you don't address this situation, is going to also reduce, if you like, the social wage. By social wage, I mean the grants that you give to people, the issues around free basic services. Those will remain under threat. And I'm not suggesting that intention to discontinue those. The point I'm making is that if you don't address that situation, then you are likely going to be faced with a situation of making very difficult decisions. And then the second constraint to the South African economy is load shedding. The inability of the state to meet its promise to provide quality and uninterrupted supply, first to the citizens and also to industry and to investors in this country. And as a result of generation not meeting demand, we have to initiate what we call in technical terms, or parlance really, nomenclature we refer to as load shedding. So essentially, it's a calculated and deliberate effort on the part of the system operator in the interest of protecting the integrity of the grid. We deny you your rightful access to electricity, and that's what we call load shedding. Of course, industry, the energy-intensive users, you are experiencing significant curtailment. You must pull back on your production. So, if you like, capacity utilization goes down, productivity goes down. There's a great amount of standing time, and then for workers, they are also going to lose their incomes. As we visited some of the OEMs on the auto side, we came here also to visit Toyota. When they tell you their stories that once there's downtime, really you can't be paying workers, because there is no productivity that is happening, and therefore it undermines the earning capacity of workers. What is the point I'm making is that the aggregate of these two structural weaknesses, they are significantly undermining and stunting the growth of the South African economy. Then the South African Reserve Bank does a modeling, and in that modeling they make the point that as a result of load shedding, in 2022, we lost about 640,000 jobs. And then they did an extrapolation going into 2023. We had the most number of load shedding days. The intensity of load shedding went significantly higher. And then as a result of that, their projection was that as a direct result of load shedding, we're going to lose upwards of 840,000 jobs. Of course, there are other parts of the economy that are creating jobs. The net picture is not the loss of 840,000 jobs. It's simply that the potential to create more jobs is undermined as a result of subtractions that on account of load shedding. So there's more and more people that are sitting at home, and people are in significant distress. Businesses are closing. You have to rethink your investments in this country, because the state is not able to meet its, if you like, elementary or primary obligation to ensure that you've got quality and reliable supply of electricity. And then they also make the point that the sectors of the economy that are disproportionately affected, they make the point that is agriculture. When I sat with the organized voices of agriculture in the country, they were telling me that 23% of their revenue is derived from activities that rely on good quality, uninterrupted electricity supply. So, so this could be irrigation, cold storage, maintaining, if you like, the issues of the cold chain. As a result of load shedding, they have to make significant upfront capital investment. They have to buy generators, and then the operational costs are even greater, because they have to buy diesel, and therefore they're becoming more and more uncompetitive. They must recover that additional unforeseen cost from somewhere. They'll recover it from the end consumer, and that's why you are seeing that the prices of food is going up. And of course, we're talking inflation. As inflation goes up beyond the target bracket, then the South African Reserve Bank is not in a position to reduce the repo rate. So that the inflation, if you like, outside other externalities, is load shedding induced from a food perspective. And we also know, if you had to do a computation of how much the poor spend on a basic basket of food, you're going to find that they are spending disproportionately more than what the rich and affluent are spending. So the poor could be spending upwards of 70% of their income just on basic food. The rich, the majority, or the affluent, the majority of us in this room, we could be spending about 10 to 15% of our incomes. So in the general scheme of things, it's insignificant, in inverted commas. But for the poor, is telling. And that's why it's important that we have a common appreciation that in addition to the devastation to industry, the poor are finding it extraordinarily difficult to deal with this situation. The second sector of the economy is the secondary sector of manufacturing. The OEMs, many of you are in that space. As a result of load shedding, there's been a significant contraction in manufacturing capacity in the country. Like I said, I mean, when there's curtailment, you have to draw back on your productivity, and as a result, the aggregate share of manufacturing, or the share of manufacturing aggregate the economy, then gets to contract. And we know that the primary sector, especially agriculture, has got the highest employment absorption capacity. By that I mean, relative to other primary sectors of the economy, agriculture employs more people. And of course, the kind of skills that is required is almost no skill to semi-skills. So it's able to absorb, if you like, the poor and the majority of what sits in the labor market, which is essentially people without the requisite skills to participate in the South African economy. And therefore, once you undermine the ability of agriculture to grow, the prospects of addressing unemployment, they also get to grow. And that's why we shouldn't be surprised that unemployment is at record levels. So the point I'm making is that there's a direct correlation between load shedding, unemployment, the contraction of the South African economy, productivity and competitiveness, and all other things that undermines growth. That's the point I'm making. Now, I'm not here to tell you what the problem statement is. You can explain it better. I'm here to explain to you how we are resolving that problem. But as an engineer, you need to know what is the problem statement so that you can fashion what those solutions are. And then let me take you through what the work we are doing to address this situation is. So the first thing is to ensure that, let me just go to, okay, yeah, let me do this. I haven't seen this version. So in the ordering of this, what is in the offing, in the immediate? Maybe let me just take you to this slide so that, okay. There's a slide I'm missing. In that slide, what I wanted to show you is what has been the performance of the grid over a period of time. So what is, we use May as a baseline. So when we came in May, the amount of available capacity in megawatts terms was sitting on average at about 26,000 megawatts. And then that number has been, the trend line has been going up. Now we're sitting at 27 megawatts. But what is the big distinction between what was the situation in May and what is the current situation is the following. Is that as a result of the 252 billion rands fiscal injection that we received from National Treasury. Remember that before the tabling of last year's budget, Eskom could not make significant maintenance in ensuring that there's a general upkeep of the installed assets at the Eskom because Eskom was running out of money. So we went to National Treasury and said, for us to be able to improve the performance of these units, it is important that we are able to invest in the most aggressive fashion in the area of maintenance. And then National Treasury agreed and said, we'll give you 252 billion rands. It's getting down. It's not load shedding. It's just, okay, no, that's fine. Okay, we'll give you, maybe if you can have the lights, or you want to see the numbers. Okay, that's fine. And then we went to National Treasury and say, give us that 252 billion rands, and that 252 billion rands came, and of course it had a number of conditionalities. But what that did was to release a significant proportion of that allocation and allowed us to do aggressive maintenance. And if you look at where we are now, as I stand before you, we are maintaining about 7,800 megawatts, if you like 8,000 megawatts of generation capacity that we have taken out. That's what we call planned maintenance. Let's put it into context. When we were during the winter period, what we did was that we only took out about 2,500 megawatts. So essentially we have taken out an additional, if you like, 5,500 megawatts to go and fix these units. And we know the following, that when these units get to be fixed, they come back healthier, they perform better, the reliability is improved, and their efficiency is also improved. When I say efficiency, I simply mean that the degree to which they produce their megawatts approximate their design capacity. So if a unit is meant to give us 600 megawatts, it's performing at 550, 580 megawatts, 80 to 90% of its installed capacity. So that's what we are beginning to see. Now, we also accepted that the approach we have taken on being aggressive on the maintenance side is got an inherent risk. And that inherent risk is that if a number of the units that have not been taken out of maintenance, they fail at the go, what I call a cluster of units failing, especially the units failing, you are going to run into a situation where you have to initiate higher stages of load shedding. So we accepted that when we did this exercise. We also accepted the following, that there's a risk of not doing aggressive maintenance. And what is that risk? That risk is that these units remain on load, they continue to produce. At some point in time, they are going to fail. And when they fail, because they are failing on their own, It's going to take us an inordinate amount of time to fix them. It's going to be very expensive for us to fix them because they failed on their own and we're not ready to receive them into the workshop. In the workshop when they fail, it means that the equipment is not available, and some of these equipments are long lead times. By long lead times, I mean it takes you a lot of time to ship this equipment to come into the country, and I've also shared with you the inefficiencies on the logistics side, so it's going to take longer. So we chose the former and say, let's go on aggressive maintenance. We now have the money. We're accepting that there's an inherent risk, and that risk could materialize. And of course, on the 8th of February, that risk materialized. So at the go, we had about 9 units failing. The big units, they took out about 5,600 megawatts, and that's why you went to stage 8 of load shedding. Of course, a lot of them was what we call boiler tube leaks. They were returned within 72 hours. What's the point I'm trying to convey? The point I'm trying to convey is that we accepted that there's an inherent risk in what we are doing, and we chose to take that risk. And that's why every time I talk of short-term pain, long-term gain, you will see that the system is going to become healthier and healthier as we move forward. And the cadence you are seeing now of 0 to 2, 0 to 2 is likely what you are going to see going into the future. And of course, if it gets worse, it will go to 3. And of course, I did make the point that there's an inherent risk in the approach that we are taking. So I thought I must make that point very explicit to yourself. Now let me tell you what is it that we are doing now as I speak to you. The first one is that we want to maintain Eskom's position on the generation side. So if you look at what has been the developments over time, as a result of the reforms that we have introduced on the generation side, we have removed the licensing requirement for someone who wants to, a private player who wants to generate electricity on his or her own. So the previous requirement was that you go to NERSA, you must be licensed, it's an inordinate process, it takes a lot of time, could be very expensive. The requirement now is that there is no cap for licensing, there's no requirement rather for licensing, you simply register the projects and then off you go, you can generate the megawatts. As a result of the reforms introduced by President Ramokgopa, we have now seen that there's about 66 gigawatts of new energy projects that are online. So this is a study that was done jointly by Eskom and the Wind Energy Association of South Africa. And we know that the private sector's appetite to invest in new generation capacity is about 66 gigawatts, or if you like, 66,000 megawatts. Just to put it into context, the Eskom installed capacity is about 47,000 megawatts. So if you like, it's much greater than Eskom. So essentially, we are building Eskom 2.0, but this is driven by the private sector. But as part of those National Treasury conditions, they had said that Eskom can engage in greenfields development of new generation capacity. All that they can do as part of that condition is to maintain. So we have gone to the Minister of Finance and say, but Eskom should be a player. You mustn't erode the ability of Eskom to be a player in the new generation side. And that's why we are doing a lot of work to ensure that there's a new generation and Eskom is able to maintain its position of that 47,000 megawatts. Of course, the configuration or the mix of the megawatts will change from coal-based to renewables. We accept that. But Eskom has to be a player in that. And then the second part was that nothing should stop Eskom from going into renewable energy projects. So you do wind, you do solar. What is the biggest advantage that Eskom has ahead of a private sector? The biggest advantage that Eskom has is that in all of its power stations, it's got a significant amount of real estate. So it's got huge land, tracts of land that Eskom owns. So that's the first advantage. The second big advantage that Eskom has in all of its power stations is that it's got grid capacity. So it can evacuate the electrons. Once it produces, it can evacuate them. The biggest disadvantage that Eskom has is that it doesn't have the money to do that expansion, to transition into renewables. The disadvantage that private sector people have is that not all of them have the land and almost all of them don't have grid access. So Eskom should be a player on the generation side. And that's why Eskom will do corporate finance, will not do corporate finance, will do off-balance sheet finance, to ensure that the stations that gets to be decommissioned, the one that are aging, Camden, Arnold, you mentioned them, over a period of time, because you can't escape the fact that we have to retire these units, because it's going to become very expensive to run them. There's issues of emissions. We're becoming stricter and stricter. We have committed to the nationally determined contributions. We have committed to the net zero path. So we must keep to that lane. So it's important that Eskom is able to transition to that. So Eskom can go into the market, package this, land is available, grid access is available, that's the skin in the game, that's the equity, private sector financing, you are able to structure the financing, and then of course over a passage of time, the asset in its totality reverts back to Eskom. And of course there's work that we are doing also on battery storage capacity, because the biggest disadvantage you have with the sun during the day, it's at its intense, and that's when consumption is a bit lower, it has plateaued. You want to have that excess energy recharging your batteries, so that when you come to your PM peak, you are able to draw from that stored energy, because you don't have the advantage of the sun. You are going to deplete it at PM peak, and then wind is going to kick in during the early hours. You recharge your batteries, and then when we get to the morning peak, you draw from the batteries, and then you go after post the morning peak, the sun is back, you follow that cycle. And that's why battery storage is important, and Eskom has done a lot of projects in this area. So in qualitative terms, what are the megawatts? What is it? What is the message I'm conveying to you? So the first intervention is what we'll be doing in the next day. What we are doing, not will be doing, because it's work in progress, in the next 8 months. The first one, and I'm talking of new generation capacity. Remember I told you that we continue to improve on the performance of those units. I told you that we have invested that 254 billion rands. The units have been taken out in their numbers. When they come back, they're a bit healthier, and of course, what we call the energy availability factor. By that, we mean two elements. The reliability of the units, meaning the units don't fail on their own, and secondly is the efficiency. They give us the megawatts at their approximate design capacity. So the first one is that there was a unit in Medupi. Medupi and Kusile are two of our newest power stations. So this unit, I think, was banned, caught fire, I think around 2021 or 2020, and then we lost it, 800 megawatts. And then Eskom said, okay, we must go out and buy a new generating unit. And as you know and appreciate, a lot of you in this room, is that these units have got long lead times. So at the time when Eskom went out, they told them that the only time we can get this generator is in 2025, that is next year. And then when we got to be appointed, engaged with the Eskom engineers, we said, it's possible for us to get a second-hand unit, because these units are designed to generate the megawatts for up to 50 years. And we said to Eskom, let's look for an equivalent generating unit somewhere in the world that is retired, which we can fire, and therefore truncate the period of returning this unit back. Eskom did exactly that, and we found an equivalent unit lying somewhere in Amsterdam in the Netherlands. It has been running for 35 years, so it means that this unit is left with 15 years. So that's the OEM guarantees that it is going to give you the megawatts and perform at the right levels. It still has got 15 years of life. They've retired it for their own reasons that they are not necessarily relevant to us. What's relevant is that the unit is available. So essentially we purchased a second-hand unit. That unit has landed about 2 weeks back. It's on its way to Medupi, and we are confident that we are going to be synchronizing it. Again, we should be doing it in September, about 800 megawatts. So we have reduced the return period of that unit by a year, so it's coming back earlier in September of this year. And then the second one is Kusile unit number 6. Kusile, like I said, and Medupi, there are two construction sites. So Kusile, now in December, we fired the synchronous. When I say fired, I mean we started the new engine, unit number 5. There's unit number 6, that in terms of their cycle was going to come on stream much later. That unit number 6 is coming on stream again in November of this year. That's 800 megawatts. And then there's Kubek unit number 2. Kubek unit number 2, you know that Kubek is the only nuclear power station operating on the continent. Egypt is building a nuclear power plant, is not operating, they are building, but Kubek has been there. And then what we are doing is to do an extension of life. So we want Kubek to run for another 20 years. So it's got 2 units that are generating each 980 megawatts. We took unit number 1, did all the requirements as required by the national nuclear regulator of the country, because they're the ones who do the sign-off that indeed we can give you the extension of life. We took out unit number 1, we have retained it. And then the slippage, the delays in retaining the units was about 6 months. And of course, I've shared with the country what the issues are. But unit number 1 is operating. And now we have taken out unit number 2. So essentially, we have denied ourselves access to a reliable, clean, quality energy, efficient energy, 980 megawatts, because we are extending the life of that unit. We are going to retain that unit by September. So these 3 interventions, they are giving us, this is 1,600, so if you like, they are giving us 2,550, 80 megawatts. So that's what we are going to get now, this year. So that's 2.5 stages of load shedding. But then these units are going to come, if you can see, September, November. September is 2 of them, and November. But we are confronted with a winter period where peak demand is going to go to about 33,000 megawatts. Now, how are we resolving the winter peak demand? I just shared with you that we have been very deliberate, going aggressive maintenance. We are doing about 8,000 megawatts. We have taken them out. When we go to winter, we are going to take the planned maintenance will move from 8,000 megawatts, will go to 3,000 megawatts. So essentially, when we hit the winter period, we are going to have 5,000 additional capacity of energy. So there's 5,000 additional megawatts that we are going to receive when we go into winter. And if you look at what the trend line is, we're hovering about 27,000 megawatts. We will add the lower end of 26,000 megawatts. We are hitting about 31,000 megawatts. We're still short of that 2,000 megawatts to survive this winter. And I'll share with you what those interventions were doing to address the winter period. So I thought it's important that there's this appreciation. This is a work that is happening on the Eskom side. So it's not a procurement process that was going to undertake. It's work that is happening as I talk to you now. The engineers are working. And this is what we have planned, that we are going to scale down on planned maintenance like we always do when you hit the winter period, essentially bring in additional 5,000 megawatts. And then there's other interventions that we are starting now. So those ones are ongoing. So if you look at, it's just that slide is not there. I wanted to show you the numbers. If you look at what we are, as I stand before you now, we are generating more than what we are consuming. And that's why there's zero load shedding. And we are not running what we call the peaking plant. So in the Eskom fleet of generators, there's what we call the peaking plants. So this is Ankerleges, Horigwa. These are the units that we engage when the demands exceed the generation to close the gap so that you don't have load shedding. Of course, because we have had a situation of constant demand exceeding generation, that's why we have been having load shedding. And we're running these plants as if they are base load. Base load means it's energy that is available 24/7. As you need it is there, you can switch it on and off, it's dispatchable, and then you can ramp it, get it to higher levels of generation at speed. So that's base load really. So we're treating these peaking plants as if they are base load. When in fact they are not base load, we must use them as and when the situation required. But as it is the case, the situation required that we needed this energy. Part of the problem we have with these peaking plants is that they use diesel. Diesel is the most expensive form of fuel. Just to give you a sense, we ran this as if they are base load when we were during the winter period. Just on a single day, we burned diesel to the tune of about 110 million rands.
So that's how expensive this is. Over a period of 3 months, we burned about 9.8 billion rands. It's unsustainable by any measure. Even if we can make the point that we're saving the South African economy, I think that argument will get to a stage where you can't sustain it. And therefore, and someone must pay for it. And how you pay for it is that you are going to find it in the tariff. When it sits in the tariff, it means that the poor are going to find it very difficult to afford energy. Then we've got a different problem. So what are we doing to address this situation? So we are converting these power plants from using diesel as a fuel source to using gas as a fuel source. We know that per kilowatt hour diesel, we've spent 5.80 rand. If we were to use gas, it's 1.45 rand. If we were to use coal, it's about 58 cents. If we were to use nuclear, it's about 45 cents. Nuclear is the cheapest from an operation point of view, operational cost point of view. From the capital cost, it's prohibitive. But I thought you should have a sense of what it takes to do that. So we're converting this from the diesel open cycle to the gas turbines. So the fuel source ceases to be diesel, the fuel source is going to be gas. What is the advantage of that? The first advantage is that it's cheaper. Kilowatt hour, I'm moving from 5.80 rand, I'm going to 1.45 rand. So that's the first advantage. The second advantage is that the emissions levels are a bit lower when you compare to diesel and gas. The third biggest advantage is that we can run this as base load. Instead of having these machines available at peak, we can have them available throughout the day. For an example, let me give you a live example. In the evening today, we are going to go to stage 2. We are not going to stage 2 because available capacity is lower than demand. We can meet that demand. The only reason we go to stage 2 is that we choose not to burn the diesel. It's expensive. But if we have converted it, there will not be stage 2 today, tomorrow, and yesterday. Because we are losing 3,000 megawatts of generation capacity that we are pulling back because this is just too expensive for us to run. And therefore you go to stage 2. That's the point I'm making. That conversion, at least of Khorigwa, because the pipeline, the infrastructure is there, it will not take us more than 6 months. And the one of Ankerlech can take us up to 8 to 10 months for us to do that. And then as a result of that, when we convert to open cycle gas turbine, we get an additional 2,000 megawatts. Available capacity consistently. That's the point I'm making. This 2,000 megawatts is not available consistently. It's going to be available as and when the situation requires. When it's really tough and want to avoid higher stages of load shedding, that's when we start to burn the diesel. But if we had converted it, you will not be having load shedding tonight. You will not be having tomorrow night and Wednesday, Thursday, you can mention them because we've got that additional capacity that runs as base load. And then when we convert this from an open cycle gas turbine into a closed cycle, so essentially your emissions that you generate when you burn the turbine, you reuse those that steam to run another gas turbine, will get another 1,000 megawatts. So in total, we'll get 3,000 megawatts. That's the point we are making. And then the second intervention, so this is a quicker one. In addition to the slide I've shown you, on what we are doing at Medupi, Kusile, and that and Quebec, this is 6 to 8 months we are starting that process. Of course, we are resolving here the fuel source. You must get the gas from somewhere, and it's a conversation we are having with the people on the gas side to help us, of course, Petro SA and the like. And then the solution closer to home. This is a more enduring solution. We've got huge potential at Richards Bay. I think in total, Eskom's share of what can be generated from gas is 3,000 megawatts, and there's 2,000 megawatts that is sitting with the private player. So essentially at Richards Bay, we can extract 5,000 megawatts. We've been working with the Premier, and of course the CEO of the SEZ is here. We are working on accelerating this. Eskom has already appointed the transaction advisor. We'll be sitting with the CEO of the SEZ and the Premier. We can accelerate this exercise and get it quick. Of course, when I say quick, I mean we're talking 12 to 18 months for you to get the benefit of the megawatts. But the point I'm making is that You're making interventions in the short term and interventions in the medium term and interventions in the long term. So this sits in the medium term, and of course, like I said, we'll get about 5,000 megawatts. The 3,000 is only for Eskom, and there's 2,000 for the other private player. I mean, CEO Tabanizulu will know the technical issues here, but we are working with the SEZ. We are confident about getting this off the ground, and we'll start running. And then we'll be expanding our renewable energy footprint at Matimba. Matimba is in Lephalale. When it's very hot, there are what we call partial load losses as a result of ambient temperature, because you are using ambient temperature to cool the power station. When it's very hot, we are losing up to 1,000 megawatts. So that's where the first location where we are going to roll out renewable energy solutions in Matimba. We are going to use that example I gave you. We sit with the land, we sit with the grid connection, we go to private sector, invest that money, and then together with the private sector, we are able to get 1,000 megawatts. And of course, this is also an intervention we are confident we can do in 12 months. So I think it's important that we give you an appreciation that there's a concerted effort to be able to add additional megawatts. If you come to think of it, this year alone, we talk about that 2,580 megawatts, and then we talk about the Matimba intervention, another 1,000 megawatts. We're talking about this 2,000 megawatts at Khorikwa and Ankerleg, and suddenly, before you know it, we're sitting close to about 6,000 megawatts of additional capacity. If you were to ask me, for us to be comfortable and go out in the public and say we have resolved load shedding, if we can get an additional 4,000 megawatts of generation capacity that is base load, I'm confident that we can say with a great level of confidence that indeed load shedding is behind us. Now what you'll be seeing is temporary situation where there's no load shedding, there's a stage 2 load shedding. So it doesn't mean that it's a sustainable solution. All you want is to know when is this sustainable solution, is when we have implemented these interventions. As I move forward, of course, we are repurposing some of the power station to go on gas. Like I said, there are also issues with regards to the supply side of gas. The resource is being depleted in Mozambique. There's a new resource that has been found. The sooner you resolve that problem, the better. Otherwise, you will not get the opportunity to repurpose. Moving from coal to gas is something that is receiving attention. And then the other one that is going to benefit us this year is this standard offer program. So essentially, Eskom goes out, neighboring countries, do you have excess capacity of energy? Yes, I have access. We do what we call a standard offer program. We say to all of them, at peak, we are prepared to pay you this rate kilowatt per hour, off peak and all of that. When you accept it, you sign and you give us those megawatts. We are targeting to get 1,000 megawatts. Now, as I speak to you, 680 megawatts are in discussion for contracting. We're already getting the benefit of 100 megawatts. The target is to get to 1,000 megawatts. We are confident we'll get that 1,000 megawatts by this year. So add to that number that I shared with you. It's 1,000 megawatts that we'll get on the standard offer program. These are the quick wins that Eskom is working on. And the standard offer program, really, it's about importing additional energy from outside. And then let me bring it closer to home as I move towards the end. So municipalities can also do their own generation. For an example, when we said with Toyota, they were making the point that I'm using Toyota as an example, it's applicable to all of you. But because Toyota, we have had those extensive discussions, is that, look, the investment is under threat if you don't resolve the energy problem. They are going to battle also to secure insurance as a result of these challenges. And if this investment indeed is under threat, it means that jobs are under threat. It means that the revenue base of eThekwini is also under threat, and the ability of eThekwini to collect revenue and redeploy it, reinvest it in the more poorer areas to build road, provide reticulation for water, sanitation, and all of that is under threat. So, if you like, these major industries are significant players in the economy of not just eThekwini, but of the province. So we need to protect the interest of these investors in the same manner that we are protecting the interest of households and in particular the poor. So as eThekwini said, working on a 400 megawatts renewable energy project, PV, combination of PV and gas to energy facility. They needed a ministerial determination. That simply means the minister says, go ahead, you can construct. We agree with you. It's consistent with the integrated resource plan. If it deviates from the integrated resource plan, you are going to get an exemption. We go to NERSA to get that approval. We are at NERSA and we are confident that we'll be able to succeed. And eThekwini can go this route. Once eThekwini goes this route, it can engage with private sector players on this to say, can you give me a PPA? Because when you want to raise money at the banks are looking at what they call a counterparty risk. Who is this person who's committing to buy this electricity from you? Is this person bankable? Is this person believable? Does the person have a track record? A lot of you in this house, big industries, when the bank sees that you are the potential off-taker, they will gladly put money into that project, and we should be able to first get that 100 megawatts and get the 300 megawatts. So the message you are conveying is that it is important that when eThekwini engages with you on that PPA, of course, you will do your own internal, go through your own governance approvals, but we are urging that it be looked favorably, because then the region can benefit from an additional 400 megawatts. And then we are doing work on the demand side. Just look at July of 2022 compared to July of 2023. We added an additional, we grew from 983 megawatts of rooftop installed capacity. Both industries and household, we went to 4,400. The Minister of Finance will be tabling the budget on Wednesday. I'm sure he'll say one or two things about incentives that will continue to be available to incentivize private sector industries and also a household to roll out rooftop solar solution. In this way, we are ensuring that we are diversifying the mix, and the additional megawatts that we are getting onto the grid, the one I shared with you, they are also supplemented by these additional megawatts that will be generating using rooftop solar, or you are relieving the grid of additional demand because you are generating for your own use, and therefore we are able to balance the system. So that's the work that we are doing, and of course it continues to increase. Our anticipation is that the rate of growth will exceed what we would have seen in the previous calendar year. So I think it's important that there's that appreciation, and I'm sure that the Minister of Finance would want to say one or two things. I will not preempt what he will say, but it's to incentivize additional capacity on that. And then on the back of that, as the Premier indicated, two things are an impediment to an aggressive rollout of rooftop solar. First is the availability of equipment, just the panels themselves. And what we have seen is that South Africa, compared to many countries in the world, has had the biggest import of solar panels compared to any country in the previous calendar year, as a result of that exponential increase in rooftop solar solution by industry and household. So it means that we are losing out on the opportunity to industrialize, because they see through, we know what the demand is, we know what the incentives are. Why don't we manufacture these panels here at home? And we have had conversation with some of the biggest manufacturers across the globe, invariably from China, to localize production here. We are confident they are going to do that. The second impediment is the skills to install these, if you like, solar panels. When I started the conversation, I said there's many people who are unemployed. So that should be the least of our problem. We should reskill them so that they are able to install and maintain these panels. And that's why we'll be recruiting about 25,000 young people, not just young people, to be able to install. And I was saying to the Premier, of course, given the size of KZN, in terms of population side and geography, you are likely going to have a bigger share of that 25,000. It's not 20,000, 25,000 of people to be trained to do this installation. Once the point we are making is that in every crisis there's an opportunity, and that opportunity must be taken within the life of the crisis. We are looking to industrialize one, And secondly, we are looking to create these new skills so that we get people into jobs, that manufacturing, we get people into jobs upstream of manufacturing, maintenance, and also installation. And that's the work that we are doing. We'll be doing that announcement, I think, in the next 2 weeks about a 2 billion rand program that we are doing. And then as we resolve the load shedding, we are creating jobs on the back of this crisis. In the long term, we have announced on the nuclear 2,500 megawatts. We have announced on the towards pump storage 1,500 megawatts. I want to give you the assurance that we are moving at speed to ensure that we are able to address this, take advantage of this situation. And maybe the last 2 slides is to say that on transmission, part of the problem why we can aggressively connect renewable energy projects. So there are electrons that are stranded. What do I mean by that? There are private players who are generating electricity, the electrons, but they can't evacuate them. There is no free ways to transport this traffic that they are producing because we don't have transmission capacity. That's the freeways that are meant to transport these electrons. And we know that the opportunities for renewables are in the Cape provinces, the Northern Cape, Eastern Cape, Western Cape, and also in KwaZulu-Natal. Of course, KZN, not really a big problem. There's still transmission capacity. I've made the point about Richards Bay, the work that we are doing. The transmission capacity is there. But in the Eastern Cape, Western Cape, there's no transmission capacity. To take advantage of this, we want to roll out about 14,000 kilometers of new transmission line. To put it into context, the past 10 years, we only did 4,000 kilometers. So we must upscale that by 325% in the next 10 years. We are going to need about upwards of 400 billion rands. I shared with you that Eskom doesn't have the balance sheet. Eskom balance sheet is constrained. The sovereign balance sheet, the matrix has deteriorated. And that's why I spoke about we are running out of fiscal runway. We need to tap into the liquidity that's sitting with the private sector, design it in such a way that the state doesn't relinquish ownership of the transmission grid, transmission line, but we are getting the advantage of the liquidity of the private sector. In so doing, in the short term, we can unlock about 2,300 megawatts of stranded electrons. That's the route that we are taking, and then I'll be making, as the minister, the necessary announcements. But we already know the corridors that are going, where we are going to get this 2,335 megawatts. It's in Uppington, the Johnny's Gromis 400 kilovolt line, and all of that in the Nama transformer in Uppington. Once we make those interventions, we get an additional 2,300 megawatts. Don't have to wait for 10 years. It's the interventions that we are making now, but we need to design a bespoke financing solution to help us to address the issues of transmission. We are looking at build, operate, transfer, and then we are also looking at the rejuvenation and revision of renewable energy independent power producer program. And then the last slide really is to say that we are working with municipalities. Remember, I started with generation. I went into transmission. Now we are going distribution. Generation is the production of the energy, electricities and energy carrier. Then you transport it through transmission line. Then we get it into a house or we get it into industry. And that's where municipalities are. In some instances, there are communities that have not had electricity for the past 3 to 4 years. Orange Farm, you can mention them in Gauteng, as a result of failed transformers. These assets are failing as a result of overload, izinyoka, illegal connections, so we must make interventions in that space. But they also undermine the ability of municipalities to generate revenue in a sustainable manner. So we're making interventions there. The wheeling arrangement, essentially we have a producer in one area, an off-taker in another geography, and then produces, the other one buys. Private sector has nothing to do with government, but the freeways that they are using to transport those electrons is Eskom infrastructure, is a municipal infrastructure. You must pay the toll fees for that. That's what wheeling is the toll fees. It's for us to determine the tariff for the toll fees and for the private players to conclude their transaction, for the off-taker to say this project is affordable, for the generator to say it's bankable, they are able to transact, and that's why we're finalizing that wheeling program to address this situation. We're working with municipalities. I gave you the example of eThekwini. They are doing that microgrid, PV, gas to power. They'll transmit it and get it to the user. That's where we are now. eThekwini is a classic example. In Buffalo, Nelson Mandela, VW and Isuzu and their supplier park, we are clustering them. We are running a turbine there, 40 megawatts or so. That's a grid that we are connecting. They benefit from that. We protect the industry. The municipalities guaranteed this revenue base. We are able to protect employment. So the point I'm making is that the interventions are not only exclusive or concentrated at Eskom. They are distributed. There are interventions that we can make. I'm sure a lot of you here might have ideas on how best we can resolve this. We welcome those ideas, and that's the very reason why we are here. I mean, that's an example of what we are doing. This is on the demand side. We are doing solar water heaters, rolling out solar water heaters, the installation of PV. These are the opportunities that we are going to get. Municipal buildings, they are also being retrofitted across the country. We must lead by example. So we're going to create distributed grid. We own the biggest real estate asset as government. If we were to aggregate that under one umbrella, we can be able to maximize the benefits going into the future. So I thought that I should take time just to journey you through on what these technical interventions were making, so that there's a degree of confidence to say, yes, indeed, there's work that is being done. We have shared with you what the megawatts are, what the timelines are, by when. I think that's important, so that when you engage with your head office, when you make investment decisions, yes, we are experiencing a difficult period. I explained to you that we have accepted that there's an inherent risk in the strategy we are taking. If there's a cluster of failures, you go to higher stages of load shedding. I said to the team cabinet, it's a temporary setback. It's undesirable, but we knew that the risk exists, and if it materializes, we get to that stage. That's why very quickly we have come back to 0 to 2. I've explained to you why we're at stage 2 in the evening. It's not because the generating capacity is not there. It's because the fuel source is very expensive. We are pulling back on diesel. I've shared with you what is it that we are doing to ensure that it's cheaper, it's affordable, and then you don't have stage 2, and also what we're going to do as we go into the winter period. Thank you very much, Chair.
There shall be light on my side so that we can see each other. Can we switch on the light so that we go on? Thank you, Honorable Minister. I think the presentation has been clear. Surely the engagement will reflect on it, and they will also give us their input on how best we can mitigate some of the interruptions that we get during this time when we are busy upgrading. Ngifuna ilight ke njalo khona ngizobabona, angiboni ngapha. I know ukuthi niyangibona, but I can't see you, so that I can give you an opportunity. It's your time to engage. I'm not going to stop anyone, but let's be precise and give each other an opportunity to engage. It's that time to give the attendees to make input, ask questions, and seek clarity where you have not get clearly what the minister was presenting. Even the premier, where you think that you need clarity or ask questions on her, even though that she was welcoming us. Premier, you know you can't escape it. Even if you say hi and sit down, there will be questions to the premier. It's more often like that. I'm not inviting any questions for you, but I'm saying you must be alert as well. You may be asked to clarify, or they may give input as you going for your supper to say that please remember this, premier, and tell us what are you going to do with that. On that note, I'm looking at the hands that wants to contribute. May I put a disclaimer. If I say I call you with what you are wearing, please understand that I don't know your name. So I'm going to ask the first round of the hands. I'm seeing a hands. You are number 1, Puti, here with a blue shirt and a navy blazer. Yeah, you're number 1. There is number 2 in between here with a white shirt. Number 3, my sister. Is there any hand? Number 4 on that side. Number 5 with the paper in the hand. Number 6, number 7, number 8. Then in the far back there, you are number 9. Am I leaving any hand? On that, we have 9 hands. Can we then do this way? You give us your name and also where you come from, not to Puma Ingut, but in your sector or your business. I'm from Ngutu, that's why I'm making example by myself. Thank you. Number 1.
Thank you, Program Director. Good morning, Minister. Good morning, Premier. Good morning, DG. The name is Peter Tembane. I'm from the South African Breweries. Thank you very much for a comprehensive presentation and for all the interventions that are coming. My input is very minor, just how business people think is, if you can consolidate just all the interventions, maybe on like one slide on the left, and then plot all the megawatts that are coming by month, so one can have a holistic picture of how many megawatts we'll have by when, and then by then we'll know when are we likely not to have load shedding. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Number 2.
Sanbonan.
Yeah.
My name is Ko Kumalo. I'm the chairperson of the BPF, Black Business Federation. Ngiyabingelela Minister, ngibingelele kakhulu ku Premier wasekhaya ngoba sisuka kaMashu. Minister, I am confused. Presentation yakho inthathe from one point to another point and I got lost somewhere. It was not clear. But then I have a question. Who runs Eskom? Is it the cabinet? Is it the Eskom board? Or is it the minister here? I need clarity on that as well. Number 2, why did we have to go to Netherlands and buy an old generator? We couldn't afford a new one. I need clarity on that as well. And how much was the old one and how much is the new one? I need to balance the figures. And 3, when we shed the load, every time we shed the load, where does that electricity go to? Because we've been shedding for a long time. And according to my understanding, you guys now at Eskom owe us that electricity. Where does it go to? We need clarity on that. And lastly, to the Premier, we had a nice program that was going on. It was called the Solar Giza program, which was going to assist, and it just stopped. We need to know what happened to that as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Number 3.
Morning, everybody.
Morning.
My name is Twayo. The company is Ed Rose Consultants. Okay, I'm just a frustrated old woman who has a project, who has been having a project for over 15 years, year coal, and in fact, it was my mother-in-law who told me, yes, Makoti, there is coal here, you can do something. And I applied to the Department of Minerals, which I was granted, and I appointed a geologist who said to me, okay, let's just do one hole and see what's there, which was done. And the results were sent to the laboratory, and it transpired it's high-grade coal. And then I couldn't go on with more holes because they said one hole is not enough to determine the extent of the mineral. So you have to do more holes. Okay? More holes were done, I think about 4 months ago, and the results are coming back again. Coal is first grade, and we can even do the gas from the coal. Okay, I got in touch with Professor Van Dijk, who has worked with Cecil, and he suggested we convert this coal into gas. That's where I am. I can't do it on my own. I'm looking for investors. I'm saying, where's the government? How do we get investors? I'm looking at Chinese. I know China has this currency, a powerful currency, and they have this technology, advanced technology, that can do this. So that's where I am, and we don't know how to get a way forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Number 4.
Thank you. My name is Sam Apumulo. I'm coming from the South African Sugar Association, which represents 6 million companies and 23,000 sugarcane growers in the KZN and Mpumalanga region. So we just wanted to comment on the involvement of the private sector into energy security in the region. We feel there's a missed opportunity to include biomass in the energy mix, especially in KwaZulu-Natal, where there's a lot of biomass available, such as sugarcane. And we just wanted to plead to the minister just to look at cogeneration again, including it into the mix. That way some of the biomass in the region